It is Book Saturday here with Coffee with Alain. Going to talk about 3 different books today. A Bouncer's Guide to Barroom Brawling by Peyton Quinn, The Story of Disney, 100 Years of Wisdom, and Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. So I'm going to share those 3 books today. Before we start, I'd like to thank everybody who joins and shares and comments. It's always greatly appreciated, and I just want to make sure everybody knows that. Books have always been a part of my life. I've been an avid reader since I can remember. In fact, when I was the only grade school kid that was allowed into the high school library back when I was young, and I've just always been a reader. It's enjoyable and educational. Yeah, it's early this morning. Maybe I need a little bit more coffee. It's enjoyable and educational. I mean, if you want to learn about safety, I have some great books that can help you. As I have shelves of books that I'm going to share some with you on these Coffee with Alain, like today, that will also help you. So the first book this morning, this is one that can help you regarding self-defense and safety. A Bouncer's Guide to Barroom Brawling, Dealing with the Sucker Puncher, Street Fighter, and Ambusher by Peyton Quinn. This was one of the early books on self-defense. This and the books by Mark McYoung, which I shared one of those last week. If you didn't see that episode, check it out. They're all at Enjoy Life Safely website, both the videos on the blog or the audios on the podcast page. Then you can find them on Apple and Spotify as well. But this book and Mark McYoung's book were some of the early books really talking about the realities of street fights, barroom brawls, and so forth, and not just martial arts. Going to say good morning to Dan. Appreciate you showing up and saying hi. Now, one of the things about this book, when I read it, when it first came out with Paladin Press, I had no idea that later I would become friends with Peyton and actually teach with Peyton in different classes down in Colorado. And this book was autographed. Not the first time I met him, but one of the subsequent events when I was down in Colorado. So it's a signed book. I don't know how easy it is to get this book anymore now that Paladin Press has closed. But if you do find a copy out there, the wisdom shared by Peyton is still valid. These things will still help you stay alive out in the bars and streets and so forth. Some really good advice by a man that, knew his stuff. Peyton was very instrumental with his Rocky Mountain Applications Camp in doing some of the adrenal stress type training, which really improves upon your abilities to survive an altercation. So I've learned a lot from Peyton throughout the years, both through his books and in person and working with him. And if you get a chance to learn something from him as well, go for it. So good book, one of those from the past. Next book that I just finished reading. It's a brand new book that just came out this year. Is The Story of Disney, 100 Years of Wonder. This is the 100th anniversary of when Roy and Walt started the Disney company and grew into this. Not the anniversary of the parks. Those came later, but this is when they actually started, the Disney company that has grown into what we know of Disney today. And this was a really cool book. Lots of photographs. It's a large size book with a lot of full color photographs. Just going through the briefly going through the 100-year history of Disney. And since I'm a Disney fan and I really like Walt and what he did and what he stood for and what he accomplished, I really enjoyed this book. Sort of a preview of going to Walt Disney Land in California here in a couple weeks. And I'm looking forward to that trip and learning a little bit more history about Walt when I'm down there at Disneyland. But it was a fun read, enjoyable read if you're a Disney fan. If you're not a Disney fan, it's not going to be one on your shelf. But if you are a Disney fan, you like to know a little bit of history about where it all began, all the way up to where it's at now and where it's going, that was a good read. And the third book today. Before I get to the third book, I am going to say good morning to Jay. Appreciate you showing up and saying good morning. Always nice to have you here, Jay. Third book, a book that I read last year, The Hands of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. Now, this is the first of 4. This is volume 1. There are 4 volumes. I read all 4 volumes last year, 2022, because I received them as gifts that year. And these are all of the comic books back from the 70s and 80s collected into 4 big volumes. And they are the reprints of the comic books, all in full color. The complete reprints. You have the ads, you have the letters that were in the editors and the responses. So if you were a fan of these comic books, like I was way back in the 70s and 80s when I was young, this is sort of a cool collection. And you have to get all 4 volumes to get all of them, which I have. I have all 4 volumes, got them as gifts, read all 4. And they're fairly long. I mean, this one's 600 and almost 700 pages. It's really, and they're all just this big. But it's comic book, so it's not, text dense. But they are fun reads if you like those. You sort of really see the differences of the times. There are things in here that some people today would deem racist and some of that. But you got to remember when these were published and the times that they were published at, and then look at where we've come today and the differences. But if you want a good, blast from the past, and if you were a fan of these like I was when I was a kid, want to go back and reminisce and go through them, a little history, see the differences, how things were back then compared to what they're like today. These are fun reads. They're big, they're a little expensive, but you can get them on Amazon and different places. They're not brand new anymore. I mean, you can get brand new copies, but they're out there. And so those are the 3 books I wanted to share today. A Blast from the Past, a brand new book that just came out a month ago on the history and story of the first 100 years of Disney. And then another blast from the past, one of the first books that I read by Peyton Quinn. It is Peyton Quinn's first book, but one of the first books that I read about real fighting and so forth. Peyton and Mark were sort of the first 2 that I read that, it resonated because it was the same stuff that I was seeing in the bars and fights and different things that I was getting into. It resonated with me because of that. And it was really just an honor to then get to meet Peyton, become friends with Peyton, and teach with Peyton. And if you've never sat around a fire, drinking a beer, listening to Peyton tell stories, you're missing out, because those were some fun days and some fun times. Dixon says, did you show your coffee mug? I missed the opening seconds. Yes, Dixon, since I was talking about books, I have my book mug today, which has the Tarzan and a couple Conans thrown in there. I don't know why the Conans are in there, because most of them are Edgar Rice Burroughs books, but they're a couple by Howard. But it was my book mug just because we were talking about books today. And that's what I have. I will see you tomorrow. It's Mother's Day tomorrow, so I hope everybody's planning to do something with the mothers in their lives and honoring the special ladies that do so much to raise children, right? So we got to honor our moms tomorrow and all those that are mothers. Have a fantastic Saturday, and I will see you tomorrow.